Order, order. Can I welcome our witnesses to our final evidence session on our inquiry on digital ID. This was an inquiry we started before the summer recess because we were very keen to see whether there was a role for digital ID in crime prevention and immigration. Clearly things have changed since then, and I'm sure we'll have some questions on that, but we're very grateful to the witnesses for coming for this final evidence session and being prepared to step in as well. Thank you very much, Chief Secretary. Maybe witnesses could introduce themselves. Shall I start with you, Chief Secretary?
Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
Mike Tapp, Immigration Minister at the Home Office.
Dan Hobbs, Director General of Migration, Borders and International in the Home Office.
Phillipa Rouse, Director for Digital Identity in the Cabinet Office.
Thank you. And we're going to start our questions, and we're going to start with Peter Prinsley.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is to Darren. So the question is, in the light of the recent changes, can you please summarise the government's current policy on digital ID?
Of course. So, what is digital ID and why are we pursuing it as a policy? It is essentially the ability to log in to the gov.uk app and prove who you are in order to access public services. That's different to a standard login where you can log into an app with a username and password, because the system is able to prove who you are. That's the difference between one login and the digital ID. Why is that important? It's important because it means, much like when you're doing online banking or online shopping, you'll be able to see your personal information should you wish to use the gov.uk app to access public services. And our hope is that this user experience will become much better than what people currently experience by having to call centres, wait for waiting times on the telephone, fill out lots of paperwork, often having to tell your story repeatedly to different parts of government. And it should start to feel much more modern than what we experience in the private sector, which will be beneficial, we argue, to members of the public when they're trying to access support and information.
Thank you. So the question is, this is really about government-issued digital ID for right-to-work checks. And it seemed like the government had initially said this was going to be a mandatory thing, and then it changed it to non-mandatory. So why was that?
So, right-to-work checks, as the committee will know, is already a legal requirement. When you get a new job, you have to prove that you have the legal right to work in the UK. For lots of people, they do that with paperwork. They might take their hard copy passport, maybe some utility bills or other forms of identity to their new employer to prove their legal status to work here. What will change from 2029 is that legal requirement to prove your right to work must be done digitally. So that we can take the benefit of that in terms of labour market enforcement working with the Home Office. The bit that's the debate around mandatory and voluntary was what type of digital identity verification is mandatory. So it's not that it's mandatory to prove your right to work, because that is already the case. The debate is how should you do that if it has to be digitally verified. And I think the easiest way to explain it is to think about it from the user's experience. So you start a new job, and you only have to do this if you're in work and get a new job. You'll get your phone probably and use the gov.uk app. And for the majority of people, they will scan their passport, scan their face, and it will prove their digital identity. What we're saying is you don't have to create a government ID to do that. You can if you wish to, but also you could go to a third-party digital provider like Yoti or other commercial operators in order to digitally verify your identity. So it's mandatory to digitally verify your right to work in the UK, but it is not mandatory to do that solely with a government-issued digital identity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul Kohler.
Thank you. Mr. Tapp, when was the Home Office consulted, or was the Home Office consulted before the decision to announce mandatory digital IDs for right-to-work checks? Were the Home Office consulted?
Absolutely. The Home Office have had involvement at official level and ministerial level from the first meeting to the last, and there have been regular ministerial meetings on this where we discuss the pros and cons of this, yes.
Weren't you the ones that said, look, it won't work because of the UK-Ireland common travel area?
No, we haven't said that this won't work at all, and we fully support the idea of digital ID, particularly when it comes to immigration enforcement for a number of reasons. Firstly, I mean, I can give you an experience of mine out on the ground with immigration enforcement, where we visited a car wash and I spoke to one of the owners who was employing workers, and he had been dealt a fraudulent passport and employed an illegal worker. So this will combat that. It will also streamline the process and make it more secure. So that there's great benefits from the Home Office's perspective, but also wider for users.
We understand that the Home Office said you couldn't bring in mandatory digital ID for right to work checks because of the UK-Ireland common travel area. Are you saying that's not the case?
There was many considerations, and that is certainly one of them.
So the Home Office said, look, it won't work, mandating it.
Well, what we're saying is that digital ID checks will be mandatory when someone is moving work, but it doesn't have to be the digital ID that we are producing. So that's a more secure process, and from the Home Office's perspective, it means that we can counter fraud at that level.
So the Home Office has not said, and let's be absolutely clear, because we're told they did, it's been reported, the Home Office, I'll read it out, the Home Office had warned that mandatory digital ID for right to work checks would not be compatible with the UK-Ireland common travel area. You're saying that's not true?
These were concerns that were part of the conversations that were had and have fed into...
What do you mean by concerns? Is it true or not?
What I'm saying is it was a concern that was raised, yes, in meetings, and now we've come to a conclusion which suits everybody, including the Home Office, all departments, and it will be positive for the country when we get this into place.
And that's that it's not mandatory?
Absolutely. The Home Office support that the digital ID or a digital ID will need to be used for right to work checks.
Okay, we're getting somewhere. So mandatory won't work, and that's one of the reasons why. What I want to know is why, given that was a problem from the outset, why the Home Office didn't say at the outset, look, it won't work because of the common travel area.
Well, there's many considerations, and the point with problem solving is that ministers and officials need time to discuss and work through and war game and then come to the correct conclusions, and that's exactly what we've done. That's what was expected of government.
And you were there at the outset, a part of that conversation.
Yes.
And sorry, Darren.
If I may say, the consultation is due to launch very soon, so we're not coming to the committee today saying that we figured out all of the issues. We'll be consulting on that over the coming months, and the key issue, as you will know, for Northern Ireland and indeed the common travel area, is the right to be British, Irish or both in terms of your identity verification. So we're not saying that you have to have a UK government issued digital identity to prove your right to work. You'll be able to use other passports as an alternative to do that. As I was saying to Mr. Princely, what is mandatory is that you must digitally verify your right to work, not that you must have a UK government issued digital identity in order to do that.
And are you liaising with other parts of government over digital ID?
So the Cabinet Office is involved on policy, legislation and coordination across government. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, which houses the Government Digital Service, will be responsible for technical build and deployment. But as I said in my opening answer, this is a foundational technology we're building not just for right to work checks, but to open up the opportunity of better public services across government. That will take, I think, a number of years, as we have to probably come back to Parliament, I would suspect, to get approval for onboarding legacy services onto the app to make sure we've considered issues around digital inclusion and transition properly. But once we've got the app and the ability to log in and prove who you are sorted, that opens up the opportunities across the whole of government, yes.
And at this stage, you're just liaising with or you're working with the Home Office, no other departments at this stage, is that, or
we're working across Whitehall already on a range of issues, yeah.
Okay. The history of digitisation by government is not a great one. We have the Verify programme that did not do well. What have we learned from the problems with Verify?
So Verify, in my view, became too complicated, and so the lesson really for me is try and keep it simple. As I will be consulting on the technical build, but my early personal views is we have systems in place in government, whether it's the Passport Office or the One Login system, the gov.uk wallet, where we've already started to build infrastructure that works across departments. What I would like to do, subject to the outcomes of the technical consultation, is think about how do we build this technology ourselves in-house as opposed to outsourcing it to, say, a big American tech company, and integrate it into what we already have so that it doesn't become a huge standalone multi-billion pound 10-year huge bill-driven piece of government IT. It is literally something that can be done quite simply, which we know it can because it's already been done quite extensively in the private sector.
And how is One Login doing?
One Login is doing extremely well. It's owned by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, but many services across government have started to use the One Login system. HMRC has started to be involved in that as well, which will be really important for people trying to access basic tax information. As I said at the start, the difference is that the digital ID is the kind of premium offer of One Login. One Login gets you into certain bits of government if they are already signed up to the One Login system and you can get your login sorted. But digital identity, because it proves who you are, will be able then to allow you to decide through the app what type of services you want to access in that way.
Right. And the estimated cost, we're talking about 1.8 billion, is that still the estimate?
The 1.8 billion was an OBR, Office Budget Responsibility assessment at the last budget. I'm not clear how they came to that view, and we did challenge them on that, but obviously independent and were able to do so themselves. Because we are consulting in the coming months, we don't know yet what it is precisely we want to build and in what order. So we don't have a number yet, and that will come out of the back of the consultation. A really important part of the cost of this programme, though, is not just the coding and the development of the technology, but is thinking about having a proper conversation across government on digital inclusion as well, because we don't want to build brilliant public services for people who have a phone and can use it, and for everyone who can't, they have a horrible customer service. So we need to think, I think, deeply about how we make sure this is of benefit to everybody. That will, of course, add cost implications, but we'll be working up those policy proposals in the next year or so, which will then point into the next spending review for future investment.
And do you think those costs coming from existing budgets is realistic?
The initial costs, yes, because at the moment we are just spending money on staff support, producing and running the consultation, drafting the legislation, bringing the bill to the House. We will have to come back to Parliament with legislation in order to get spending authority at the point at which we start building the technology itself. But the bigger prize really is when we then decide what customer-facing public services we want to integrate into the app. And my expectation is we'll not just have to come back to Parliament for that, but make a business case to the Treasury and the relevant department as well.
That will be a separate cost that you... Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We've got a guest on with us, the Chair of the Science Technology Committee, so Dame Chianwara.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's a great pleasure to have you here, Chief Secretary and Minister. And just two quick points of clarification, I hope. So I think, Chief Secretary, you said that it was currently mandatory for you to prove your right to work digitally.
Not currently digitally.
No, that's right. So it's currently mandatory for employers to check right to work digitally, but the individual does not have a duty to prove anything digitally.
So the only thing that's changing is the digital bit. So at the moment, the legal burden is on the employer when they welcome you to your new job to check that you have the right to work, and you can use documents to do that. The thing that will change is not that framework, but that the checks must be done digitally from 2029. That's the only thing that will change.
So does that mean that the individual has to have some kind of digital ID, or can they use their passports, existing documentation?
Yes, they'll be able to use existing documentation, but the employer would have to go through the process digitally.
But there's no burden on the employee to do digitally. Thank you, that's very helpful. And then you also said that the Cabinet Office was involved in the policy for digital ID across government. My understanding was that you were leading.
That's right.
So just make sure. And the involvement is that you're leading it. Right, that you're responsible. Yes, you're responsible for digital ID across the whole of government, and then the Science, Innovation and Technology Department is responsible for the implementation and execution of it.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe White.
Yes. So the One Login programme, are you introducing it as a sort of process of osmosis? I've had to log in twice in the past 2 weeks. The first was on behalf of my husband, who is a company director with the new ID checks for a company's house. He had to go through that whole process of taking a photograph of his passport and the little square at the bottom of his passport. But also I had to use it because my passport got lost because I was renewing it. And that I still ended up making phone calls. So is it we're being drawn into it as a process of having to use it because that's the only way? And I've looked at the list of different organisations within government and now required to go that route. How many people do you think are now using that one login process? And what's your targets as we go forward?
So I don't have the number of users. This is something that the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology run for government. But there are, as you've experienced, an increasing number of services that are using the one login system, which I hope you have, from your experience, is probably better than it would have been without it, but still not good enough, if that's a coherent way of describing it.
The Company House experience was a brand new experience, but it was very, very good.
Good. Well, that's great.
I enjoyed using that. But yeah, the lost passport was still barriers. I had to make phone calls.
And the problem with that is that the one login system works well, but you're still accessing different parts of government with one login. The idea with your digital ID and the Gov.uk app is those services come to you in one place as opposed to you having to go to multiple places and log in repeatedly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No. A bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just focusing on the consultation. So we're now in March 2026. Why has the consultation not been rolled out yet?
A couple of reasons. Firstly, I wanted it to not just be a technical consultation for kind of companies who have an interest in this. I want to make sure that it's something the public can engage in. And if you did a very technical consultation, it probably wouldn't be very user-friendly for the kind of general public. I've also asked, and we'll be announcing very shortly, how we can consult in a different way to make it more engaging for the public too. So there'll be traditional consultation methods, as you would expect, as our legal requirement to do that. But we'll be announcing shortly how we're kind of going above and beyond that to involve the public in more of a national conversation about how it might be
So
done.
do we have a date yet when the consultation will go live?
I'm hoping it'll be next week. The actual day is moving around a little bit, but it should be next week.
And how has the government used its time since the original consultation was announced that it would be taking place to make sure that what does get announced is got the right questions in it, drawing the right level of information, advice, experience from users as well as technical experience?
Yeah, so we've had a series of roundtables with different stakeholder groups. We've also been building the Taskforce team that we host in the Cabinet Office. And so the stakeholders we've been talking to have been representatives of different views, people who are pro it and people who feel that they're currently against it, digital inclusion representatives, the companies that currently work in this space. We've got a good private-led market for digital ID verification, and we want to work with them to enable their growth and investment in the UK, as opposed to undermining the businesses that they've put enormous amounts of capital and innovation into, as well as thinking with other organisations like the banking sector, because my sense is that the public will want to know that this app and the technology will be at least as secure as your banking app, because of the private information in there. So we've been having conversations about what does that look like? What experience do banks have using some of this technology already? And could there be a world in which, once we've done this work, you might not, if you want to, you might not just need it for your government login, but could use it to more quickly open a bank account, for example, because the ID verification is sufficient enough to allow that to happen.
And how has the consultation changed, if at all, following on from decisions that have now been reversed or pulled back or changed from original announcements?
So I suppose the only substantive policy kind of clarification was on what is it that's being mandated and how does digital ID work. The consultation will ask questions about that on the basis we've talked about. But the wider consultation will ask lots of obvious questions, and if anything, it's probably just become longer than it was when it started. But I think it's important we take the opportunity to get that right.
Thank you.
Peter Princely.
Thank you very much. So it seems to me that everybody in this country already has a digital ID. They've got an NHS number. They get it when they're born. And the NHS app is a thing which is increasingly being used and is proving very popular, I think. And it seems to me that a government digital ID will be something that will have to be sold to the public. The public will have to see the benefits. And they are already seeing the benefit, I think, of the NHS app. So what plans are there to... how are we going to sell this to the British people? And are we thinking that we might link it to the existing digital ID, which is the NHS number?
So we will keep the NHS app separate to the gov.uk app, not just because it's already really quite well developed, especially after the COVID pandemic, but also because it has a very clear and strong brand that people trust. They think differently often about their health data compared to maybe their tax or passport or driving license data. And so they will remain separate. They may in the future be able to talk to each other with your consent. So, for example, if you're going through the gov.uk app to apply for additional help for your children and it needs to verify that your child has a diagnosis, it may be able to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down to confirm whether that's the case, but they will not be integrated into one single app. In terms of the benefit to customers, the test for us is that we build customer experiences that are so useful that people wish to just use it. And when you're dealing with passports, driving licenses, maybe your ability to claim child benefit or support for childcare, when you've got to pay your tax disc or speak to DVLA, when you've got to try and get through to HMRC, there's a lot of customer-facing service across government, which at the moment, because they're all run by different bits of government, are not just poor experiences for citizens, but cost a lot to run. I would much rather all of that became much easier, that you could do it at a time that suits you in the way that suits you, that would then free up time and money in the public purse to be able to spend on other priorities for the public.
Finally, do you see the digital ID as having any role in the voting system?
It's an interesting question. Look, digital ID, as I say, is not just a login. It is equivalent. It will be equivalent to a passport level verification of your legal identity. So at the moment, it obviously doesn't exist. So we can't put it in the list of things that will be available for the polling centre. But it will be eligible, given the level of verification, to be used for that purpose in future years once it becomes available for users to download.
Louise Atkinson.
Thank you. Chief Secretary, I think you mentioned before about the provision of some other identity services through the private sector. So could you just say what role you now see existing digital identity providers playing in the government's digital ID programme?
So at the moment, lots of companies use digital ID verification. If you're applying for other providers exist, but a Barclays loan to get a new iPhone, you'll get taken to prove your identity, often by scanning your passport on your face as part of a quick decision to get the loan agreement through for your handset. So all of those private sector experiences will continue to be able to operate with those private ID verification companies. For government services, as I say, the crucial point on the right to work check is that you'll have the choice. So you can do it through the gov.uk app and get your own Gov ID if you wish to do so, or you can go and use a third-party provider and still meet the legal requirements, have your right to work verified digitally. As I say, what's important to us is that digital ID companies in the UK have done very well, enormous amounts of innovation and great startups who have been able to scale in the UK and export their services internationally. Lots of capital have been invested in them. And what I don't want to do is have a government programme that either tries to replicate what they've done or undermine their businesses. And so it's important to me that we work in partnership for the benefit of them and their private sector and export opportunities, as well as improving public service access.
So just on that point, I mean, we heard from the Association of Digital Verification Professionals in the evidence that they gave. And I think it was fair to say there was a level of scepticism about, given that industry's 17-year track record of developing the technology as you suggest, that the government would be able to catch up, and also that, frankly, it's a good use of potentially £1.8 billion of public money to even attempt to do so. What would you say in response to that?
Firstly, it won't be 1.8 billion, and it definitely won't be 1.8 billion to build the technology. Look, you have the option of having a private sector company having your login details to access your private information in public services. My sense is, but the consultation will ask these questions, my sense is the public would rather have a login to their public sector data without it all going via third-party private sector companies, would be my sense. But we will ask those questions in the consultation and people will get to feedback their views.
So is a potential outcome, not saying your preferred outcome at this stage, but depending on consultation responses, that the government decides to pursue mandatory digital checks and digital logins, as you suggested, but actually that a government directly provide a digital ID would not be something that is taken forward?
So no, we will be providing a digital ID that will be free for people to have, but only if they want to have it and want to use it. If they still want to use their physical passport and non-government providers of ID verification, they're perfectly entitled to do so.
When we heard from providers, and this was a few weeks ago, they were very concerned because at that point the government's position was that it would be mandatory to have a government digital ID. That had been the original announcement. That was affecting their business and the confidence that they had. Do you accept that that was an issue for them?
Yes, and I went to a round table with them to talk about this when I was given responsibility for it. But I was very clear to them at that stage, and it was the first meeting we've had, that I didn't want to undermine their businesses and I wanted to work in partnership with them.
And is there, Lewis has just mentioned, is there a world in which you decide that actually there's one of them is a really good model and actually you could just import that into the government systems?
My sense on the kind of technological build, how do you do this? These companies, as you say, have been doing it for 17 years because 17 years ago we had no idea how to do it. Now we know how to do it. And we have been building lots of the foundational technology in government which we can build on. So we can benefit from the kind of know-how and innovation that exists. But my view, and again it's subject to the consultation, but my view is I would rather build this in-house in government as opposed to an external private company running such a foundational technology for access to public services.
But you will need to use external consultants. I mean, government doesn't have that know-how. We're inside government, that you will have to bring people in from external providers.
I'm sure we will in some way. I mean, the government digital service at the moment already has people who are building one login system technology. So my hope is that we either have or will be able to recruit some civil servants to come in and help us build this. We should have external challenge on that process because that will probably give us a good sense about whether we can do these things better or not, as opposed to trying to second guess internally. And I am working on the basis that there will be an external oversight board for this programme as well, of people who have done this and know how to do it, who will be given relative access to come in and keep us on our toes and challenge us as we're working through that.
And just before we move on to more specific questions on right to work checks, we know that the previous CDL visited Estonia. Are there any other international comparisons you've been looking at?
There are lots, actually. Britain's falling quite far behind lots of our competitors on delivering modern public services. Estonia is often the one that most people talk about. They had very unique circumstances after the fall of Soviet Russia as to why they built this technology. Is clearly different for us. But for me, if you look at Denmark or the state of New South Wales in Australia, there are more kind of comparable examples of democratic countries like ours that think about privacy and security and the ability for citizens to decide what they wish to do, for parliamentary oversight, those types of conditions in which these services have been built and are running very successfully. And in many ways, we've just got to try to catch up. And I think ultimately the public would expect that of us because at the end of the day, taxpayers are paying for these public services and they know that they're paying a lot for them and they're not always there when they need them.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to right to work checks with Margaret Mullane.
Thank you. It's a question for the Minister. Mr Tapp, will the Home Office, do you think, be leading on the implementation of mandatory digital right to work checks?
We're working with the Cabinet Office, but we're certainly taking a prominent role in ensuring that we get that absolutely right post consultation on what we learn from that.
But you're leading. You would put yourselves as leading.
Well, I mean, it's our responsibility. So yes.
Right. Okay. So, with that in mind, when do you see it will be mandatory for employers to conduct right to work checks digitally? Where do you see what time?
The aim is by the end of this Parliament to ensure that that's the commitment that's been made.
Okay, so we've had a series of presentations from different people as we've been going through this, and they were talking about the digital right to work checks. The largest employers it seems to be concentrated in, and the smaller and medium employers not so much. And they gave a kind of presentation to say there'd be some organisations that would never have been checked up on the workforce and that. So going forward, how are you going to support the small and medium-sized businesses to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's important that, along with ensuring that those who are not currently active digitally in the public, that goes for employers as well. And of course we'll learn from consultation on that and ensure that we put the right support in. What that looks like at this moment, I can't give those details because we need to go through the consultation, but there'll certainly be support there for the small employers. I think actually it's important that they do have this mechanism, because that is often where we see illegal workers being employed.
Okay. And obviously, we've touched on it earlier about people that are excluded from online as well. So 10% of our citizens don't have a passport, for instance, as well. So how do you see how you're going to support that on the transition, on the digital right to work for those that are going to be excluded, possibly?
Yeah, and
you don't want it to worsen either as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is vital. And apologies, I can't go into full detail yet, pre-consultation, but it's certainly a consideration for us going forward, and it certainly was within the Home Office when it came to e-visas too, and we spent considerable sums of money going out to community support groups, for example, to assist people. So there's positive lessons we can learn from what we've done in the past with e-visas, for example.
So as you do this consultation on the people that are excluded, that are not online essentially, and there's a good percentage of the population, how are you doing that consultation with them?
My understanding, there will also be community groups engaged. I don't know if anyone else can add anything to that.
Happy to. So there'll obviously be the online form for people who are online. For those who are not, we will be making available consultation packs to all members of Parliament should you wish to run something in your own constituency, which can formally report into the consultation. We'll also be announcing further detail next week about a more innovative approach, which I would like to talk to you about, but I can't because it will ruin my press release before we launch the consultation, which is something the government doesn't normally do in order to try and make sure it's as open and accessible as possible. And the questions you ask, especially on types of documents, is important, because at the moment the majority of people who start a new job and go to work do have a passport. Some don't, and so you can fall back on your driving licence. Some people don't have a passport or a driving licence, and so at the moment employers have to try to infer how likely it is that you're telling the truth based on a utility bill or other bits of paperwork. And we need to make sure that not only is the system easy to use for both the employee and the employer, and probably easier than the current regulations they need to try to follow manually, but that when it comes to those who are then excluded, how do we use existing community infrastructure to provide a place for people to go? And I'm interested in thinking about libraries, post offices, postal workers. What are the touch points we have with people's lives, for example, where we can say, look, if you're really struggling, you can go here to get assisted in this digital process.
Thank you.
Jo White.
Businesses that fail to do the right to work check tend to be there's been enforcement on those when there's intelligence or information that's fed through to the system. How will digital ID actually flush out those employers in future?
I can start and try, but there's more Home Office. I mean, my understanding of how it will be helpful is that by digitising the right to work checks, from an intelligence perspective, you then have more clarity of where you might need to go with enforcement officers. So at the moment, if an employer does all of it with paperwork, scans the passport, prints it off, stamps it, puts it in the filing cabinet, we have no idea whether they've actually done it or not. And so if you've got company A and company B, you've probably got to go and check both. Whereas actually, if we know company A has done it all because it's been digitally verified, we don't have to bother going there in the first place. And it means the capacity we then have for enforcement can be more focused in the gaps that become evident as a consequence of the digital basis.
So you will have records of those companies because either they're set up as a sole trader or because they are a registered company house, so you'll be looking at those particular organisations.
Part of the consultation will look at, well, what does the audit function need to look like in order to be effective? Employers have the legal burden to check, so they need to be able to prove their compliance with it too. But my kind of personal view is that you will have some audit function that won't say that, you know, Darren Jones is working at this unit, but that they've maybe got 5 employees and they've had 5 approvals, and so you can kind of move on to the next one.
It will certainly help with targeting. It won't be the answer. Obviously, there's a lot of intelligence stream, but it will help sort of prioritise where we visit.
So, Minister, when you started off, you said the example was someone with a fraudulent passport. How is that going to be any different if you can just turn up with your paper passport and it's fraudulent?
Well, there's the power of digital in checking whether something's real or not. You know, this chap looked at a passport and wasn't trained like our border staff are in working out whether that's real. And you know, post technological design and consultation, I'd imagine that would be more effective.
So you're confident that, I mean, you know, with any system, fraud can happen?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not that perfect get in the way in the good, but I'd imagine you know, using a digital system is a lot more reliable than a person who's not trained in assessing passports.
And it was my understanding that it's not mandatory to do the right to work check, but it's a statutory defence for the employer. No, is that incorrect?
No, there's a requirement for everybody to be checked that they have a legitimate right to work in the UK. Okay. There is defence if they demonstrate that they have collected paperwork that evidenced it that turns out potentially not to be.
The check, the imposition of a check will not change. It will still be the same requirement on the employer to do the check, that it's just that the employer will have to do this digitally. And will there still be a statutory defence should there be a fraudulent
I think
passport?
that's all to be worked through as part of the consultation.
We'll consult on it, but I think the answer will probably be inevitably yes. And the benefit, of course, is that with the digital system, and especially our newer passports, which have a very high level of identity verification and security, it means the employer doesn't have to figure out whether it is valid or not, because the system will tell him whether it is or not.
The legislation is going to require new legislation to introduce the digital element, but it won't have to change anything else in terms of right. Okay, Paul Kohler.
I think you've just asked my questions, actually. That was very convincing. So what you're telling us
question
is,
or the answer?
I'd like to pick a hole in it, but I'm not sure I can. You're telling us it will give you audit trails because you'll be able to see, look, these employers have used the system, others haven't. They're the ones we're going to look at. That's what you're telling me, isn't it? And the actual using the system will be more convenient and it will be better at checking than a human being. That's what you're telling me.
Yes. And I think an important part of that is we are told that one of the pull factors for illegal working in the UK labour market is that at the moment it's quite easy to get around it. And so it's not just useful for the employers, the employees and the Home Office enforcement team, but we hope it says to people it's actually harder to work illegally in the labour market here, so it's better that you do it legally in the first place.
You finished?
I'm finished, sorry.
Don't worry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much. So I'm particularly interested in the e-visa system. My committee, Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee, is looking at digital transformation, and the e-visa system is I think that it's a system that has 10 million people on it now, so it's probably the closest example to what digital ID requires in terms of scale, which requires 60 million. And so, which is why I was somewhat surprised when we had the Cabinet Office Minister and the Digital Minister before my committee a couple of weeks ago. Neither of them were familiar with the e-visa system, and I hope Chief Secretary, that's something which will now change in the Cabinet Office. So I asked them about some of the issues that had been raised with the committee about the e-visa system. And Minister Tapp, you wrote to me, and you said that that the e-visa programme continues to embed secure by design delivery. What did you mean by that?
So that's a number of... talking about security is always tricky in that you don't want to give away information that can be used by those looking to penetrate. But essentially, we're looking at a number of firewalls and regular penetration testing to ensure that it's secure for the users.
I think that's a very basic answer. Because when we're talking about security, say, for example, one of the examples that had been given to the committee was somebody, I think to this committee, in fact, somebody whose photograph was not the right photograph in their e-visa record. Now, that's an issue of data security. It's not a thing about. I'm not quite sure why you can't tell me how you're addressing that.
So you mean the photo was of somebody else?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I mean that I would take away, if you don't mind, and have a look at that individual case. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean there were some early issues as we adopted e-visas and began the rollout, which we did in phases. There was a technological issue very early in the phase where we identified very early there was an error with that. That has been rectified. I'm not aware that there have been further issues as we've rolled it out to other cohorts, and from the 25th of February we've rolled that out, the e-visa programme, to visit visas, replacing the paper vignettes in passports. So that was an early issue which was then rectified.
Well, that's interesting, because we heard about we heard evidence for a significant number of errors throughout 2025. Automated responses to web form submissions cited delays due to higher inquiry volumes. People with multiple visas and issues with regards to the being able to access their own visas. Are you saying that these issues have all been resolved?
So I can't say that they've all absolutely been resolved, but I am aware that, as I say, we were rolling this out. We became aware that there were certain technological issues in the early adoption phase due to a variety of reasons. We took action to remedy those situations. As I say, I'm not aware of recent examples, but I would have to go back and check. Obviously, individual customer issues will arise at different points, but as I say, the challenges, some of which you mentioned, we were aware of and were rectified.
Right. So we've heard from the organisation, the 3 million, which reflects the number of people that they think have been adversely affected by issues with the e-visa system. So you're reassuring us that those issues have been rectified, as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. We have 11 million users of e-visas, 700,000 checks a month using the e-visa system for right to work.
And are you aware how many issues, how many problems?
I don't know how many individual issues that can arise because of a variety of things, but the issues of different facial images was a technical.
Do you monitor how many issues are?
The operational teams will, because there's a customer inquiry.
You should be able to send the committee a figure.
I'll follow up
on
with
that.
the minister if we can get that.
I suppose I'm trying to understand what lessons you are learning from the e-visa rollout in order to support the rollout of digital ID.
I think the question from my perspective is, and again this will be in the consultation, the way I think about it is the digital ID system, you want it to be like a digital version of the passport system as opposed to the e-visa system. So the passport system has to reach a certain level of verification in order to give the level of confidence that it is is legally proof of your identity. And my understanding is those security features in the passport system are higher than they are in the e-visa system. So where I see kind of excellence in government that we need to learn from, it's more on the passport side. For me, I think the e-visa system presents lessons for us more when we then start to onboard other services in the future onto the app, and thinking about how you do that successfully, because ultimately if you are causing problems for customers, they're not going to want to use the system in the first place.
Yes, and on that comparison, so when Mr. Tapp, we talk about security by design being built in, we heard that there were 90 legacy systems on which the visa system was built. So how can you? So I know this is a question for both of you. How can you have legacy systems across government? How are you? How are you addressing the legacy system? issue?
So the government funded in the spending review an increased level of investment into legacy IT transformation. There are too many legacy IT systems across government. They won't all be transformed into modern systems by the end of this Parliament, because it takes time to continue to maintain services being run from legacy systems whilst building the new ones. For digital ID and the gov.uk app as a foundational technology, as I say, subject to the outcomes of the consultation, where I think we will end up is looking at the passport system and the existing gov.uk app and gov.uk wallet technology to build from. The challenge for us on legacy IT will then be in the future when we're trying to take a existing customer service that may be on a legacy IT system and onboard it onto the app, which will have to be a cloud-based system. And that's when the business case comes into play, because it may end up for some services being more expensive as you transition off of legacy IT into the new one. But I don't see that, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I don't see that at the moment being a problem for the digital ID build. I see it being a challenge for service integration once we've managed to get through the first phase.
Do you see because people will only benefit from the digital ID build once it's being used. Yeah. People are using it. So, for example, do you see e-visas being migrated onto the digital ID?
So we have not made any early decisions yet. We've consulted across government to say to departments, what do you think the services are that you would like to be considered to come onto this system? We've already done some early forms, for example, the veteran card being on your phone, driving licenses will be coming shortly. But the prize will be when things like the childcare entitlement system comes onto the app.
I suppose ultimately, so the benefits are when people use it. And for people to use it, it has to access data that's already there. It has to access the data about for the veterans, but in this case, the 10 million data records for e-visas, etc. And then you come up with all the legacy system issues. So how, and just to put in place the digital ID system, how will you access individual data? Will it be new entry, or are you going to use existing data?
So there's two parts to that answer. One is, I do not think we will end up saying that we want to build one massive central government database with all the data in. I think we will, and I guess I think this is in the consultation, but I think we'll end up with a federated system where different types of data are still secure in different departments and different places, but that we have the legal right, subject to you as the user on your phone saying you want to be able to pull that together to provide a service. The second part of the question is really important to me, because what we do not want to do is build a fancy app on top of a 1970s computer, because it might look fancy on the app, but it won't work. And so for me, as you're onboarding services onto the app, you have to deal with the legacy IT system and transfer to the new base system in order to get the full features of what we're trying to build.
And that will work. And the digital right to work check is a service you've committed to. So you will have to onboard all the digital right to work data. You will have to have the interfaces or so.
Could I come in? So I actually was the programme director for e-visas, and so have moved on to digital identity. So we'll be taking a lot of the experience and learning with me. So it was a really big undertaking, as you know, in terms of building the e-visa system. Absolutely, it was kind of how do you onboard all that legacy data into a new system, and how do you cleanse it and make it right? And the Home Office, as Dan said, has put in a huge amount of effort in terms of improving the data quality and driving out those issues. I think some of the real benefits we've seen from e-visas in terms of giving people direct access to their own data means that they have much more control over their information. I think those are exactly the sorts of lessons that we will be taking, the positive lessons that we'll be taking into digital identity, but we'll also be building on learning from the experience of such a complex task that e-visas was, to make sure that we are learning learning those lessons. And as the Minister and Chief Secretary have set out, we are not looking to reinvent new systems. It is about the connections between the systems. So, and right to work, we've got the e-visa system, which as part of that has a view the right to work service, which through the share code process means that employers can check someone's right to work. For people with British passports, they can use the DVS services available, or of course just show their passports. So, in terms of the development of the system, it'll be how we join up all those different parts of the system, probably, rather than building new ones.
When will you? Thank you for that. When will you be able to use digital ID for your right to work check?
Well, again, end this Parliament is the intention.
The commitment we've made is by 2029. If I can bring it forward with the consent of Parliament, I would like to do that. I struggle to think these things often take as long as I'm told they do, but I might be wrong. But the long stop date, which was the Prime Minister's commitment, was 2029.
That was a commitment for mandatory digital ID.
For this system.
And you're using the same commitment for the system?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question about the security of this whole thing? Where is this data? Where is this data and how secure is it? Is it physically somewhere? Is it in some great storage system in Iceland? I mean, where is this thing kept and how secure is it?
Well, it doesn't exist yet, so it doesn't belong anywhere. It's an idea at this stage, as opposed to a thing. We will be consulting on some of the questions on security standards. What I've asked the team to do, though, is to make sure that it is at least equivalent to banking level security with your banking app. Some of that is about device level security, two-factor authentication, those types of things. But then we'll also have system security requirements about where the data is being held and how it interacts with other IT systems. But as I say, this is my personal view as opposed to government policy, because we've not consulted, but my personal view is I would rather that was built and held by the government with parliamentary oversight and accountability, as opposed to us kind of outsourcing it to a private company to run on our behalf.
So you would anticipate that it was geographically located in the United Kingdom, for instance?
I would assume so, but we're not at the stage to be able to answer that because we need to consult on it.
We're going to move on to some more general questions around digital ID, but just while we're still on e-visas, one of the points that was made to us in evidence was that one of the problems is that your e-visa is connected to your passport, and then your passport changes and the number changes, and because it's only a 10-year or however long it is, and you're constantly having to update your information. Are you looking to try and change that so it's not a case of having to link to a new passport every time someone gets one?
My understanding is that it would be the user's responsibility to update that. Yes.
The complaint that was made to us was that this just adds a level of complexity that is unnecessary. If actually when the e-visa was issued there was a number attached to the e-visa rather than it being attached to the passport number, then the individual could prove their right to work more efficiently and effectively. So is there any possibility that
this
might
certainly
happen?
where the benefits of consultation that we can take those views on, but of course a passport does last for 10 years, so it's only once every 10 years that would need to be done.
Well, not of course if you're under 16 and you've got one that's 5 years, etc. There are always complications, Peter.
I mean, surely you must agree that we should move to one number for one person. I mean, I come back to the NHS number. People are born with an NHS number, which could be their number, and it could also be the number on their passport, the number on their driving licence, the number on all their government documents. Why do we need a system which keeps changing the number?
Well, digital identity will, as I say, not be a logging, it will be a legal identity in its own right. I see no reason in the long term why through the app you can't just have one place where your information is, whether you choose to have access to certain services or not, and whether you therefore wish to use that legal identity to verify other engagements with government. The only expectation management I would pose is that it will probably take us quite a bit of time to get there because of where we're having to start as a government. And as I say, we are trying to catch up in relation to comparisons in Denmark and Australia and other places that have been able to make this work.
Just on the point, it's also the foreign country that issues the visa, and we link the identity for various border security reasons on their first entry to that identity document, and that's verified before they travel to the country. Therefore, if they change that document, we're able to then subsequently link it back to that original issuing document. So there are wider border security identity verification for people who are not British citizens, that we link it back to their passport.
Paul Kohler and then Joe White.
So this is a naive question, but back to Peter's point. It's not really about digital ID, this question. It's broader than that. Well, why don't we have a single number for everything? NHS, we've got our NHS number, we've got our passport number, we've got our NI number. Why don't we just have one number for people to interact with government? I still don't understand why we don't.
I think it's just because historically we've never had a government-issued identity in this country that is mandatory in the way that maybe other European countries do. So we've had the freedom to have a passport if we wish to have one or not, a driving licence if we've qualified or not.
Why not use your NHS number for those things if you do? Why not just say, use that number you've got?
Issued at birth.
Sure, but it's always been freedom for citizens to decide whether they wish to do it or not, as opposed to us saying that this is what you must do.
No, but that doesn't explain it. Because if you decide you want a passport, right, you're in it. Your NHS number is used. If you decide you want to work, your NI number is used. I still don't understand why we don't use the same number.
I think Parliament would have to legislate for that, for the public to have. My hope, though, from a user experience, is that if you are logging into the gov.uk app with your digital ID, as I say, in a number of years' time, and some of these services are coming into the app, you will, in practice, just use one thing to get into the system.
I know what you're saying. So all your numbers will be, will be verified by the app. I just do not begin to understand why we don't use the same number. I don't understand the civil liberty argument that somehow you have a civil liberty to have a different number for your passport to your NHS. It's bonkers.
I'll defend the Minister. I think it's a legacy issue here. I think you wouldn't start from here,
That's
would you?
always the answer on this. We've got to push them.
Let's start again. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's, I think, what we're asking the Minister about. But Joe White.
It's also the case,
Sorry, Mr. Hobbs.
It's also the case that an NHS number is not given to non-British nationals. So you will have people who are born overseas who become British at a later date, and therefore it may not be that there is a single number that works for everyone at every stage of their life.
Yeah, I think we're diversing. This is a question for Mike. What calculations has the Home Office made on the potential of reducing fraud using digital ID?
It's difficult to quantify the exact impact in terms of numbers, but we can say absolutely this will streamline the process, make it easier for employers to check, so there won't be that accidental fraud as well, accidentally letting fraud through, and much more difficult for those who are seeking to present a dodgy passport to actually do so. So I can't give you those exact numbers, but it will certainly have an impact, yes.
So,
if I may just add, I think there's a wider benefit as well, because we know that fraud more generally is a huge issue and a huge strain on our police service, and I'm sure we've all had constituents who have lost money fraudulently online in some way, and they get pointed to action fraud where it just gets reported as a statistic. The police don't often have the capacity to get involved unless it's a huge fraud, and people are left high and dry. And this is because a lot of the time, if you're on, I don't know, Facebook Marketplace, or I shouldn't name companies, an online company who's pretending to be someone, you might get sucked into a fraudulent transaction without that company being able to say that it is you who you say you are. So digital ID, where people want to use it to verify their identity in private companies and in online spaces, in theory should be able to do that and be able to reduce wider fraud as well in the future.
Okay, so the Association of Digital Verification Professionals, they told us it's not able to effectively share intelligence on fraud with the Home Office. So how will the government make better use of intelligence generated by digital identity providers?
A lot of this depends on the audit store and the decisions that are made around that, which won't be made until after the consultation. There's great potential there.
But it's currently mad, quite frankly, that you've got companies verifying the identity of people, and if they think there are problems, they currently don't share that information with us because we've got nowhere to put it.
Yes.
I mean, that's slightly balmy. So my hope is that we'll build a system where whether you're verifying your identity with government or with someone else, the fact that you've been able to do that or not should come together into that audit function.
A way of feeding it in directly. Yeah, good. And so has the Home Office explored where digital ID would be beneficial in other areas?
That's a good question. I mean, there's already fantastic platforms for as you've seen your passport very recently. I think the main area will be around immigration enforcement for the Home Office and combating illegal working.
And this is a question for Darren, and it's a similar question. Are there any other services that will be you believe should be accessed by digital ID?
I think there are lots of services that we would be able to make much more easier and much more integrated into the app. If you think about your DVLA tax, getting your MOT information presented to you in one place that's due, having the paperwork in a place for that. When it comes to your driving license, when it comes to paying money to HMRC or even getting some back if you're lucky. There are lots of simple customer service issues that are absolutely capable of being put into one place. And then in time, some of the bigger, more complicated ones that should be much easier for people. I think about the childcare system a lot. The fact you've got to log into the HMRC website every 3 months, verify your employment, work out 80% of the fee, do the card payment yourself, then find your provider and then process the payment. And then you've got to get a form from the local authority, get a code, which you've got to sign with your nursery provider every quarter in order to get you funded. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. If you can just verify your eligibility for something and allow government to process a payment for you, then we should do that.
I can see you've been experiencing personal pain.
I declare my interest. Yes.
So, how is the government going to set objectives for the programme, and do you think they're realistic?
I do, insofar as, in the course of this Parliament, all that we are trying to do is get the consultation and the legislation in place to enable us to build the digital ID system and integrate it into the app to allow for digital verification of right-to-work checks. That's it for this Parliament. And we will do those things, and I think they're all feasible. For me, though, the bigger prize and the things we've just been talking about, I want to get on with as quickly as possible, but I'm probably not going to be able to get to many of those this side of the next general election. But if we can build the foundations on top of which we can modernise public services in the future, then that will be a good piece of work. And
so will the government's consultation on digital ID consider the issue of function creep?
As in which functions are coming onto the app.
Yeah.
The consultation will ask questions on that. I'm also looking forward to working with Parliament on the legislation. My sense at this stage is I don't particularly want to present a bill to Parliament that tries to envisage all possible functions in the future and pre-legislate for them. Yeah. So I'm interested in thinking about how do you build a framework piece of legislation that enables the building of these digital foundations and says that in the future, when government wants to onboard a service, we will come back to Parliament, ideally not with a primary bill because it's too slow, but maybe a form of statutory instrument or a legislative reform order. Maybe we can work with select committees to have a proper check and balance on that and just get approval from Parliament as we onboard those services in the future so that you don't have function creep without any democratic oversight.
Maybe a model restoration and renewal could look at. Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you. I mean, just picking up on that point, Chief Secretary, clearly there was significant public opposition, I think, to mandatory elements of this, and there's mandatory, pure mandatory, or there's mandatory de facto, i.e., if you want to have a right to work check, you don't have to have a right to work check, but if you do, it has to be digital ID. So, do you accept the principle that there should not be de facto mandating of any services? So it might be in the future, it might be less convenient for a citizen to do something using a non-digital ID, but ultimately they will still have that option even when government onboards future services.
I think that's right, and I think if our government or any future government wants to change that position, they ought to come back to Parliament to get approval for it, quite frankly, because it is an important thing for the public. And I think it's also a responsibility on us as we launch the consultation and talk to people about the country on this, that we explain as simply as possible what it is and what it isn't. So I think a lot of the opposition to digital ID, lots of people find the idea of digital ID quite scary or intimidating. Then there's a lot of misinformation about state surveillance and state control. It's the absolute opposite of that. What I want to try to achieve is that you get more control over your data than you do now, and more control over your data than you might do with private sector companies. So you are in control, there is transparency, you will be able to see on the app what services you're using, and if you don't want to use them, that's up to you, and what data you're sharing. And the prize is that public services that you rely on are there when you need them in an easy way, in your hand, in your mobile phone. So I'm hoping the consultation and the work we do over the next few months will help to deal with some of the myths that have built up about what this programme is and what it's not.
On reflection, given that prize, was the way that this was initially announced as a mandatory thing, has that risked undermining public opinion for the potential significant benefits that you outlined?
I think the mistake that we made is it was announced and then there was a period of silence, and we shouldn't have left a period of silence. I think it was a reflection of a number of things. There was a major government reshuffle. We were announcing it just the week before the party conference season, and various reasons, but it would have been better to have followed up with the Prime Minister's announcement on more public engagement about things that we've been talking about today. But our job is to do that now, and to use the consultation and the legislative process to make sure that the public and Parliament is fully on board with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, this idea that Big Brother is watching you is something that colleagues here across all parties have a view about, but also it's something that I've had to counter in my constituency. A huge sense of fear that this is government doing things to people. And I think it's more than a consultation that you're going to have to do in order to break through that and give that people that sense that this is about them taking control over their data. How do you think you can do this and achieve this huge, for me it's a big milestone, because it's a difficulty I'm faced with my constituencies?
I think that's right. As I say, we'll be providing materials for MPs to do things in our constituencies, if that's something that's useful. We'll also be doing traditional media, digital marketing campaigns, and those types of things whilst we go through this process. Because, and this is going to a slightly different part of my brief, but at the moment government's not very effective at getting its message across online for a whole host of reasons. And what we saw off the back of the digital ID announcement was a lot of mis and disinformation that kind of scared people, and we were pretty silent about what we wanted it to be and what the benefits were. And so we have to make sure that we're doing that more effectively online as well as through those kind of traditional mechanisms.
Your postbags were as full as everyone else's. Just a point, you said about receiving intelligence from digital ID providers. Could you look at why they can't provide you with that intelligence today? We shouldn't need to wait for a new system for you to have that, because if they've got information about fraud, etc., you should be able to find a place to receive that. Just before we finish, just so that I'm clear on what you're envisaging. So the way you've explained it is you will go into something that holds data around this is who you are, who you say you are, and then you can then use that to access your national insurance number and your tax records, or your NHS records if that's what you want to do, or your right to work, or your driving licence number, or your passport number, etc., which is the point I think Paul and Peter were making about the number of different numbers that we'll still have. I mean, isn't there just a risk with that around duplication and error that, Darren Jones goes in and another Darren Jones is there and they happen to have very similar driving licence numbers because your surname's in your driving licence, it's possible that someone else qualified around the same time you did, and somehow the systems get the wrong Darren Jones, and then that's it. You're then stuck in a cycle of never ever being able to prove who you are.
So the digital ID system will be a standalone system that we will build. The challenge that you've rightly alluded to is when you're then connecting up services to access through the app, because it's going to be a federated data system, your ID on the app needs to be able to find you in the database here that you're interested in. There will no doubt be challenges around that, depending on the quality of the data and the IT that underpins the service you're trying to onboard. And that's why I say in many ways the foundational bits that we're doing now, to me, feel like they're probably going to be easier. The harder bit is going to be onboarding those services in the future. And we will need to start with some smaller, simpler, hopefully convenient things for the citizens, and over time build that up. It's not going to be something we'll be able to do in a number of months.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, Chief Secretary. The services to be onboarded will not only be national government services; they may well be local government services as well. Is that? How will you decide, and who will decide what services come on board when?
On the first part of your question, it would be great to involve local government. We can probably already involve local government where it's useful information sharing, like your postcode and bin collection day. Apparently this is one of the most looked for web pages on
Which
council
is absolutely, everyone looks at the bin day.
So we can probably integrate that very easily. Many local authorities are already using the government one payment system, so you might be able to integrate payments depending on where they're at, but again it will take time. In terms of who decides, my expectation is it will be government and Parliament, by which I mean government's going to have to say to the departments which things should we try to put onto the app. You have to scope.
The government, do you mean the Cabinet Office?
We will coordinate it in the centre of government for sure, but we will need to think what's the best use case to get onto the app, what's the state of your current IT system and data, how complicated or not is this. We'll have to put that into a business case and get Treasury approval for it, because you'll need to spend some money to onboard the system. We will want to think about what cashable savings are there by making it more productive and make the argument through spending review cycles to do it. And as I said earlier, my expectation is we should then come to Parliament in some way to just check that you're happy with us doing that. And my sense is the early examples are probably going to be the smaller, simpler ones, just as we start to kind of get the system working before we get to the bigger prizes that will be available in the years ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm struck by the fact that you identified the passport as the sort of example of excellence, rather than a digital system for what is going to be a digital transformation. Is there, we've heard about some of the challenges that we've experienced in the public sector. Is there an example of a digital transformation, a service, etc., across this government because that's where the learnings will already exist?
I often go to the passport system because the digital transformation of the passport system, and therefore a much better user experience that we all have, is a great example of it being done well. But we will know from those of us that served in the last Parliament that the reason that happened is because the old system completely blew up. So you don't want to wait for a system to blow up before you make it good. But what has happened to the passport system has been one of the best examples, I think, in government.
Right, that was a digital transformation of one existing system in one department.
Yes.
You're rolling digital ID across all departments.
Step by step over time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't covered?
No,
okay. Well, in that case, can I thank you for your time, and I'll bring the session to a close.